the labour and indirect labour that you use to produce the product. And it could be annual added value in dollars by the annual cost to produce it, which is annual sales minus annual purchases, and of course number of employees, average working hours, and fully burdened labour rate. By fully burdened, I mean including overhead and profit. Even this type of information, first thing, it is not readily available. As an academic, could ask about the productivity in man-hours, but I could never get an answer if I asked about money. That's competitive information. And another thing with using money is how do you take into account rates of exchange between different countries. I believe it is better to use a metric which has an output and input measure that is internationally consistent. But first, before performing any research into productivity, we need to have an acceptable metric. And first, there is no universally accepted productivity metric. There is one which most shipyards accept. Another thing is, for a metric to be useful, you have to be able to get it, the information, without a lot of effort. You don't want to get sheets and sheets of computer printout and spend days finding the information you need. You want it to become readily available. Many people have used steel weights as the basis, and when we were building similar ships, it was not bad. Others have used light ship weight, the weight of the ship, without the cargo or the payload, displacement, and gross tonnage. Now, I know many of you know what gross tonnage is, but some of you may not. It is not a weight, it is a volume. It was originally developed to take into account the earning capability of a cargo ship. A gross ton is 100 cubic feet, excuse me, not using metric, 100 cubic feet as a measure. The first four I say is weight, and the other is a volume. And research and experience has shown that weights really aren't much good. And unfortunately, even gross tonnage is not very good. If you take a quick example, just look at Japan and Korea, when Japan was still number one. And you can see that Japan had 114 million man-hours, Korea had 91. But if we look at dead weight, Korea delivered more dead weight than Japan. And if we look at this gross tonnage, it was the same. So if we use dead weight or gross tonnage as a metric, it looks as if Korea is more productive than Japan, and that is not so. If you use the metric man-hour divided by compensated gross tons, then you can see that Japan is the better in productivity than Korea. The compensated gross tons, because gross tons on its own was not much better than weight, but over the years, different countries have developed the concept of compensated gross tons, and it was a compensation for complexity, a cruise ship versus a tanker, and size, 10,000 tons or 150,000 gross tons. It was a coefficient to try and make them all equal. And this is basically what I have mentioned. The West European Association of Shipbuilders adopted the compensated gross tons approach as their standard. And then Japan and later Korea adopted it likewise through the Organization for Economic Development. In 1974 was the first time they developed this chart of coefficients, and it has been modified since, but they have never ever developed compensation factors for naval ships. I mentioned this, a little bit history about gross tonnage and so on. Next one. The gross tonnage is very simple today. It used to be quite complex, but the problem was that different countries had some differences. For example, an offshore supply boat built and measured for gross tonnage in the United States would be 300. The same ship in Europe, offshore supply vessel, would be 1,600. So as they use gross tonnage as a measure to pay port fees, canal fees, you can see the Americans were having an advantage, the North Americans were having an advantage. So the international community said, no, we must have only one way to measure, and this is it. It is simply a coefficient measured by the volume of the ship, hull and deckhouse in cubic meters. The compensation is given by a series of coefficients, as I mentioned, and the value of 1 is for the 15,000-ton deadweight general cargo ship. A big tanker would be a lot less than 1. And of course you get the compensated gross tonnage by multiplying the gross tonnage by the coefficient. In 2006 they came out with new values. And today they no longer use a table, they use an equation. Compensated gross tons is the parameter times the gross tons per ton. And this is the table. Now, I developed this approach many years ago as a cost estimating help in planning design. And the factor B I kept constant. You can see they're very close. I kept that constant deliberately. It was the shape of the curve, if you will. And I modified the parameter A, which took care of complexity. So if you will, A takes care of complexity, and B, in a simple sense, takes care of size. In 2006, they also introduced, when I say they, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the fact that if you build one ship, it takes a certain amount of man-hours, but as you build more ships, you have the learning curve, the experience curve, and the ships down the line take less man-hours. So if you have a shipyard in Japan building 12 of the same ship, it is wrong to give them the benefit when you're comparing productivity for the series. So this is a series effect that they have developed. As I say, man-hours per compensated gross tons, but it's really the inverse of productivity, and compensated gross tons per man-year. Many countries used it just to compare the total country output, especially when we're dealing with subsidies and things of that nature. And it is an important metric, and it's used in most countries. In some countries that only build naval ships, it has not been an accepted factor because there are no coefficients. So a lot of my research into productivity is developing coefficients for naval ships.